What is up? What is up, YouTube? Perfect timing. Sidebar. P. Diddy lawyer tells all 8 major bombshells about trial and possible relief. Okay, this video was 7 hours ago is when they put it up, so they had to have time to do it and everything. So it might be a little bit. Let me get my man together. Let's run a test. Let's run a test right now, because I already know we're gonna need you. We're gonna need you, baby.
A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit.
That's just a test for right now. Let's see if we're gonna need it. I hope we ain't gonna need it. Let's go ahead and let's keep it straight with no chases. Y'all hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell. Uncle Mike in the Philippines, y'all. I am excited. I told y'all he wasn't getting out no time soon. You can keep it. I want to keep this, and he gonna do at least 3 years.
Yeah.
This is big.
Here we go.
There's a lot of rumors floating around the internet and in the news media.
This is big. We are sitting down with one of the criminal defense attorneys of Sean Diddy Combs as the convicted rap mogul awaits sentencing in federal court and a decision on whether he'll actually be released from jail before sentencing. Oh, and by the way, there's also talk that he may get a pardon from the president. Yeah, all this going on. I get the chance to actually discuss what has been happening behind the scenes with Diddy's lawyer, Alexandra Shapiro. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, we're about to do something that we've never done here on Sidebar. For a show that has covered every aspect of Sean Diddy Combs' criminal case, we are about to speak with one of his defense attorneys, Alexandra Shapiro. She is part of his legal team at trial. And the trial, by the way, that ended with Combs acquitted of the most serious charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking. He was convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. They call these the Mann Act violations, moving women and men across state lines for the purposes of commercial sex work. Now, we have talked about Alexandra Shapiro before. She was the attorney, for example, who argued for admitting that video of rape accuser Mia wishing Combs a happy birthday after the alleged assault. She played a key role in this case. And with questions about could Combs' convictions be thrown out, what could he be sentenced to, will he make bail before he's sentenced, can he get a presidential pardon, this feels like a great opportunity to get some insight into all this and certain aspects of the trial, like why didn't they call Christina Coram? All right, so let me get right into it. I am joined right now by Alexandra Shapiro herself. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here on Sidebar. We really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I have a lot of things I want to get into. We will talk about all the latest developments. But first of all, I got to ask, what was it like to be part of a team like this one? Because you know, every argument, every question, it is going to be focused, debated, on a national, maybe an international stage. This is a major case. And also, by the way, you were representing somebody and are representing somebody who for the past 2 years has taken quite a hit in the media and wasn't the most popular figure in the last 2 years. So to be representing Sean Combs in this massive trial, what was it like for you?
I mean, it was actually an amazing experience. First of all, the team was fantastic. I mean, I've never worked with so many great lawyers with different talents meshing together. And it was great after I've been working on this case since last September, dealing with the client being just bashed in the media, bashed by a ton of frivolous civil lawsuits that just sort of whipped up the hysteria against him. It was great to finally be able to help him have his day in court. And so the actual witnesses could be heard, and we had a chance to really expose a lot of the truth of what was really behind all of this.
Obviously, this is a win, right? He was acquitted of the most serious charges that he was facing. Did there ever become a time, though, during the course of the trial, maybe in the first several weeks, when you're like, I'm a little nervous, I think he may get convicted of racketeering or sex trafficking, or you were confident throughout the prosecution's case that they just weren't reaching their burden?
Well, we felt good about the trial most of the time and we're confident, but you never can be too confident in a federal criminal trial. I mean, especially in the Southern District of New York, the government almost always wins, and it's a huge challenge and really, really difficult to win. So we were always concerned. There were points where it seemed to be going well, but you can never bank on that.
By the way, talking law, like we do so many times here on Law and Crime Sidebar, there is a reason that Morgan & Morgan, or we're taking their accounts, we're listening to their accounts, and what they're saying just didn't amount to a federal crime. Is it a mixture of both? Just trying to understand what the argument was.
I mean, I think it was a mixture. It depended on the witness. And a lot of the witnesses were telling the truth, but the truth didn't hurt Sean. It helped him. There were some people who were shading the truth. The great thing about it was there was a ton of evidence in written communications that people had created at the time, all these text messages. There were videos, and that really helped us expose the truth because these were things that had been recorded this is what people were, the girlfriends, others were saying to Sean at the time of the events in question. And so, there was really no way for the witnesses or the government to hide what was in the written documents.
Now, I will tell you, if you had been following what we've been doing here on Sidebar, Law and Crime, we call balls and strikes. So there were, during the course of the trial, we would say, this was the strength of the prosecution, this was the strength of the defense. There was such effective cross-examination of these key witnesses that we all kind of wondered, was the defense going to call any witnesses? And you really did. And what was that decision? Because I understand there were witnesses who were planning to be called. There was an idea to put forward a defense case. There was a choice not to do that. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that strategy was about?
Sure. I mean, you always have to be ready to put on a case. At the end of the day, what it comes down to at the end of the government's case is how well do you feel it went in for us? And it's always risky to put on a defense case. People don't realize that, but there's always two sides to everything. And if you put on a witness, and even if it's, 70% good, if the prosecution scores some points, it can really undermine you. And so if you feel like the government's case has gone in really well for you, it can be actually riskier to call any witnesses. People don't necessarily realize that, but at the end of the day, we just made a decision that we thought the case had come in well, and we didn't want to, sort of change the dynamic in a way that could be risky for us.
Was Christina Quorum ever potentially going to be called by the defense? We were all shocked why the government never chose to call her, since, her name came up almost every single day through almost every witness. Was there a plan by the defense to call her?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get into specific plans or non-plans, but it was more of an overall decision just not to put anyone on and just to use a few pieces of evidence that hadn't come in.
What do you think about the prosecution's choice not to call her? Because I will tell you, we did lunchtime shows, live shows with our audience. I would say 80% of the questions that we got during 7 weeks of testimony was, why is she not being called and will she be called? Were you surprised the prosecution chose not to call who was supposed to be the main alleged co-conspirator?
I mean, I don't think so. I think that she would have been a double-edged sword for them, and they probably didn't want to take the risk. As you saw during the trial, even a number of the witnesses that they had always planned to call that they did put in kind of blew up in their faces or had positive things to say about Sean that maybe they weren't anticipating. And so it would have been pretty risky for them to put Christina Quorum on the stand, I think.
There was so much being said about your client in that trial, obviously in the media, facing a number of different lawsuits. We also wondered whether or not he, and it's his decision alone, whether he wanted to take the stand and give his story, tell his story, give his version of events. Obviously, there are a ton of risks that come with putting a defendant on the stand, but it would be his choice. Was there a conversation about that?
Well, I mean, I can't get into, attorney-client privilege conversations. Obviously, he thought about it, decided not to. And, as I indicated earlier, we thought the case had gone in really well for us. And so we liked where we were. So that was basically the decision.
Now, the big news, some of the big news, a lot of big news came out after the trial, was the firing of Maureen Comey, the lead prosecutor in this case. Now, there's obviously a political angle to it. There are comments that she has made. But I have to ask, you going head to head against her for so many weeks, months and before that, the firing of her, what did you make of that?
I mean, I think it was unfortunate. She's a very well-respected prosecutor. We had good sort of professional relationships with her during the course of the trial. And I don't really think it had anything to do with the trial, but I can't really say anything beyond that. It just,
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough. Let's talk about something we can get into quite a bit. Let's talk bail. Okay, so we did a previous sidebar breaking down the defense's renewed motion for release, several arguments for why Sean Combs, should be released on bail pending sentencing, acquitted of the most serious charges. There's no comparable case of someone who is convicted of the Mann Act alone and not engaging in sex trafficking or a prostitution for financial gain, and they would be locked up like this. Talked about the issues plaguing the MDC, how it is dangerous, how he's not a risk of flight, not a danger to the community. But do you think Judge Arun Subramanian is going to be persuaded by your letter, by your motion? Because obviously he specifically highlighted after the verdict your client's violence, how the defense asserted at trial that Combs was violent. Do you think he's going to have a change of opinion now based upon the legal papers?
Well, I think we certainly hope so. And, as we pointed out in the papers, the unfortunate violence that occurred was mostly a really long time ago, other than the one incident in June that Jane testified to, which was kind of unusual. I mean, they had been together for 3 years. There had been no violence, and she essentially started the fight. I'm not excusing anything, but it was kind of a one-off. And I think the government really hadn't put in any evidence of any recent violence. The Intercontinental video, remember, that was almost 10 years ago. He broke up with Cassie in 2018. And in our reply papers yesterday, we submitted a letter from Gina Hyun, who was one of the alleged victims, a different ex-girlfriend. And I think it was a pretty powerful letter about how Sean has changed, how she's not concerned about violence. She thinks he should be released on bail. So we're hoping that that will persuade the judge, given everything else, particularly, as you noted, like the really, really unusual nature of this particular Mann Act conviction and the fact that he's already been in prison, or jail rather, for like 11 months. This case is a one-off to begin with, but we're not aware of any case like this with a Mann Act conviction where anyone's done that much time to begin with. So,
and prosecutors, I'm imagining, have come back or will come back and say, well, listen, look, after the raids on his property, he engaged, or what they would say, he allegedly engaged in criminal activity and obviously violence, they say, with Jane. But they say, look, what was in his hotel room when he was picked up in New York. They made allegations of what he was trying to do while he was in the MDC, whether it was using other inmates' phone privileges to have three-way phone calls. That was litigated before trial. What would be your response to say, you make the point that he is a changed person. The violence that was shown during the course of this trial is from years ago. But how would you convince the judge to say, listen, we are being truthful, we are being honest, we are being forefront, that he really is a different human being? Because the judge, again, this was right after the verdict and didn't have an opportunity for a briefing schedule. How can you make the argument that he is different and that he should be trusted?
Well, I mean, I think, the point you mentioned about the arrest, I mean, unfortunately, Sean has struggled with drug addiction for a long time. And I think one of the good things and positive things is that has come out of his incarceration. It's given him an opportunity, to rehabilitate. He's committed to continuing that. He's committed to a long-term program of therapy and helping with the domestic violence problem that he's had in the past. So, at a certain point, you have to just maybe it is a leap of faith, but you have to just give a person another chance. And he really is committed to change and to there being a new chapter of service on his part. So, I think we have to hope that the judge will agree with that. And I think we've made a strong case for that.
Do you know when the judge might make a decision on bail?
We don't know.
Okay. If he denies release again, does that give you a sense of what sentencing could be like? Now, to be clear, my understanding is Judge Arun Subramanian even said at the point, if I make a decision on release, it's not indicative of where I'm leaning towards sentencing. I know there's a pre-sentencing investigation still being conducted or has been conducted. There's a lot of factors to consider. But I have to ask about whether this is going to, have an effect on sentencing. Do you believe it's going to have an effect on sentencing? Does it give you a preview of where the judge is lining up? Because my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you are probably going to be arguing for time served, maybe a minimum of 21 to 27 months. Where do you think the judge is going to go here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to take each step at a time and that the judge is not going to prejudge that. There's a lot more information he needs to get, not only the pre-sentence report, but we're going to make a very fulsome sentencing submission. And he's going to have, a much more detailed picture. Even, the trial was about the charges, right? And he doesn't have the full picture of all the factors about Sean's life that he's going to consider. There's going to be a big fight about the sentencing guidelines. We think actually we're going to end up arguing for an even lower guideline range than we had originally believed at the time of the verdict, where we didn't have we had like a couple of hours to try to figure out what to say about bail. So, I hope the judge will grant bail, but I feel confident that even if he doesn't, it doesn't necessarily mean he's not going to sentence Sean to time served. He's going to take everything into account when he gets all the submissions. And, I've got a lot of confidence that the judge is going to be fair and not prejudge the situation.
And you also have this motion for judgment of acquittal, that the Mann Act convictions should be tossed out, Combs be granted at a minimum a new trial. Number of very interesting arguments that are present, and it's basically that there has really never been, as we've talked about, a prosecution conviction on a Mann Act like this, that Combs wasn't profiting off of the business. There were all consenting adults that were involved. The jury didn't find that there was any sex trafficking, that this isn't even prostitution per se, it's more voyeurism, that the intent wasn't for people to travel for sex for money, but paid them for their time. They were all having a good time. There's a First Amendment argument that the freak-offs and the hotel nights were performances that were videotaped so he could watch them later. It's amateur pornography. There's an argument that he was prejudiced because of all the other evidence that came in to prove RICO or sex trafficking, but would never have come in if this was merely a prosecution for the Mann Act violations. Specifically, we talk about the Intercontinental Hotel footage. But couldn't the counter argument be, if you look at the text messages and voice notes and the travel, hotel, the payment documentation, that these charges, the Mann Act charges, could have been proven based on that evidence alone and not anything else about racketeering or sex trafficking?
Well, I think that goes, I don't agree with that. I think that, as we argued in the papers, the government didn't really show that the purpose of the travel was to have sex for money, and that in fact all the testimony and a lot of the other evidence showed that the men were being paid for their time. But even if we were wrong about that one, we have a number of the other arguments that you mentioned that really aren't undermined by those records. So for instance, one of our main arguments is that this statute, which used to be called the White Slave Traffic Act, it has this long history, but even with this long history, it's never been applied to a case like this. The term prostitution in a lot of states doesn't include this conduct, even if someone's being paid. If the person making the payment is paying essentially to observe other people having sex, that's not prostitution. So we've got the First Amendment argument, as you mentioned, and the new trial argument. So all of those arguments, I think, are independent of, the issue you raised, which, but so we think we have a really strong motion. And so we're hoping the judge will agree. We'll see.
So just to be clear, I'll list out a couple of things that stood out to me when we were watching the trial. There was apparently this voice message that was played from Combs to Paul, right, one of the purported sex workers. Hit me up when you close. There's a voice message. Hey, Jess, I need to get him from Atlanta to here. Let me know. Hit me up. There was a message from, I think, Combs to Christina Coram. Can security bring me 5,000? There was another audio message to Jane. I sent you 15K, baby girl. There was another one to Frank Rodriguez. Frank, make sure that room is set up right. So in other words, you could look at this and say, and the argument is, even despite all that, it's paying people for their time. It's setting up, let's say, amateur pornography. What makes this not, because it always seemed that those charges were relatively straightforward, transporting people for the purposes of sex work. You're saying the intent was not sex work. That just so happened, whatever happened, but the intent wasn't there. Just want to clarify that point.
Yeah, so that's one of the arguments. And then the other argument is just that it's more of a pure legal argument that prostitution only includes when you're paying someone to have sex with you, and he wasn't having sex with the males. So that's kind of a totally separate thing, even if you buy the government's argument that these payments were always for sex. And I do want to point out that, like, there's testimony and evidence that there were a number of occasions where the guys didn't end up having sex and they still got paid for their time. There's a bunch of text messages between Sean and people who work for Cowboys for Angels, one of the escort services, where, she's making clear that they dot all their I's and cross all their T's and that this isn't sex for money. So that's kind of his mindset. And, the crime is transportation with the intent for the person being transported to engage in prostitution. So it's all sort of what's in his head and whether he's believing that he's paying, or arranging the transportation rather, in connection with prostitution. And then you get into sort of what is prostitution, and does it include, paying someone even if you're not the person who's going to have sex with them.
Let's say the motion for judgment of acquittal is not successful. Let's say the bail motion's not successful. And let's say your client is sentenced to a significant prison term, because there is discretion on the part of the judge. There's been a lot of talk in the news about this idea of a presidential pardon. Is the president really considering it? Have there been conversations with his team? Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Well, I don't really know. The trial team's not really involved in any of that. There's a lot of rumors floating around the internet and in the news media. So I can't really speak to it. It would make sense that the president, given his history, would be thinking about it for someone like Sean, but I can't really, I have no personal knowledge about that.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit?
There's no way in the world that a president should be even shouldn't even be considering giving this man some type of pardon. That's bull. That is straight up bull.
Given his history, would be thinking about it for someone like Sean, but I can't really, I have no personal knowledge about that.
And if there is an unfavorable sentence, I imagine you would immediately appeal this conviction and sentence. What would be some of the arguments that would be made, if you can give us a preview, and why you think they would be successful?
So I think Sean would almost definitely appeal if all of those things happen, which we hope won't. But it would be a lot of the same arguments that are in our post-trial motion that we've been talking about: the First Amendment, the argument about whether this actually was transportation to engage in prostitution, whether he should have, in light of the acquittals, he should get it in the alternative, a new trial where none of the evidence about the violence and the alleged racketeering would come in. Those would be, the principal arguments, I would imagine. Yeah,
if they didn't have racketeering or sex trafficking, you think they would have actually prosecuted him just for Mann Act violations?
I don't think so. It certainly would have violated Justice Department policy. I mean, the Justice Department policy for the past 75 years has been generally not to prosecute people other than people who are actually running prostitution rings to make money. And then on top of that, in more recent years, the only kinds of cases they've brought have been cases where they're alleging sex trafficking or other serious crimes. And at the beginning of this case, we made a selective prosecution motion. We argued that Sean was targeted because of his race, because this, with respect to the Mann Act in particular, because this was so unique. And one of the things they came back with is they said, well, we charged him with RICO and sex trafficking. And then they pointed to other cases involving white men where they had brought these other charges as well as the Mann Act. So
I know I have to let you go. Before I do, I just want to ask you one more question, because I know all of our viewers will be asking. What happened to victim 3? What happened to victim, I think, 5? There were other people that were supposed to be called by the prosecution, and there was a back and forth where the defense basically said, right, to the prosecution, they're not a part of this case anymore. Everybody's been asking, weren't there supposed to be other people that were going to be called by the prosecution and weren't? Is there anything you can tell us about what happened there?
Well, I think one thing that's now public is that Gina was the alleged victim 3, and it's pretty clear she doesn't consider herself a victim. And I imagine, I don't want to speculate, but I think the government, they certainly cut back their case as things went along. And, there were probably a lot of witnesses along the way who were pushing back on the government's hoped for narrative and saying, that a lot of it wasn't true. And that's certainly what happened with Gina, I believe.
Well, listen, Alexandra Shapiro, really, really appreciate you taking the time to come on here.
Thanks a lot for having me.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.
Jesse Weber, that's my man. My bad, y'all. Jesse Weber, that's my man. Pots and pans, 50 grand. Dude, come on, man. You gonna sit here and tell me, come on, man. Them liquor people, them people that really run the world, decided to not put their foot all the way down on this neck. This is what I'm banking on right here. The sentencing is going to be 6 years, 1 year already served, and then he'll get out 4 years for best behavior. He gonna do some time, y'all. I keep saying that from day one. I kept saying, I said, nah, Diddy about to do some time for this one. You done pissed off the wrong people up there, man. Dude, you done pissed off the wrong people. So you know what that means? You got to pay. They teaching you who the boss. Boss. That's what bosses do. We teach who is the boss and who ain't the boss. We just show. I guarantee you. Y'all remember this right here. Y'all remember this. Yeah, I'm gonna jump out there. I'm gonna jump out there real hard. I thought it was gonna be 3, but I think the judge is about to, oh my God, man. The judge kind of pissed off at the jury. You got jurors that lied. You got speculations that some of them was bought. Then this other dude going on, oh my God, man. That just pissed off, man. Hey, let's see what happens, baby. Y'all take it light, take it slow. Tell them Uncle Mike told you so. Peace out.